That's just perfect timing to hear that beep, beep, beep. Well, hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us and welcome to Enduring Minds, a podcast about men's mental health. My name is Jason Bahamundi, and along with Evan Birch and Gandhi, we will be discussing topics that impact our mental health and how we cope with our struggles. It's not going to be all doom and gloom, though, as the three of us love to laugh and have fun, which is also an emotion that we want to explore. In our debut episode, and I will interview Evan, and in the following two episodes, and I will both be interviewed by the other two parties. This will give you an idea of who we are and how we approach our mental health from different perspectives. We will have guests on the show in the future, but for now, thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the conversation. So let's get this going. Evan, since you're the one on the hot seat today, we've got to ask you right away. How are you doing today?
Yeah. Oh, that's a loaded question there, Jason. Always a loaded question. I will be truthful because sometimes people just say I'm fine or I'm good. So I will say that I'm a little bit nervous, a little bit excited, a little bit anxious. Obviously, this came together faster than any of us could have imagined, and I think that's why it feels so right. So yeah, that's how I'm feeling.
I will tell you, last night I barely slept because of the nervousness and the excitement of doing the show. I have practiced that intro 77 times and it still came out terrible on the 78th time. So, I appreciate the honesty and the ability to have open and frank conversations right out of the gate. How about you, buddy? How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I think just like Evan, and like we were talking about in the green room, I'm definitely a bit nervous about the show. Not because I don't think that, you know, not because I don't think that we're not ready for it, but more so of all the outpouring of love, if I were to reframe it positively, and the messages that we've gotten about how important this show is. I think that there's a certain expectation or kind of like a weight on the shoulders of like making this the show where people can turn to for their issues or to be able to be more transparent and feel like they have a safe space. So I think just kind of the weight of expectations, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean the reality is we're doing something that most men don't do, which is talking about our mental health and our struggles, and that alone is going to give us a little bit of pause and stress and anxiety. But anyway, this is about introducing the audience to Evan, and I want to get into this so people can get to know who he is, what he's about, and why this show is important. Which brings me to my first question to Evan. So, in general, why is it important for you to discuss mental health and specifically men's mental health in an open forum like this, as opposed to the three of us sitting around, a coffee table in private?
The idea that, men are supposed to be this strong, never showing any sort of weakness, I think has been perpetuated for far too long. Whether that be in sport, in career, in life, in family, you name it. I think it's just this, when's the last time if you look at old TV movies or anything like that, the vision that you always get is this person who's just like always together, always has it handled, always providing for the family, always just being that strong person and never not being able to be strong. So for me, it's been a journey, and I've been very open and vocal on my own platform through my documentary, as well as other discussions and speaking opportunities that I've had. That being vulnerable, doesn't need to be seen as a weakness. It's actually a strength. Being able to actually pinpoint how you're feeling, why you're feeling it, and being able to say that to other people without being guilt, having that guilt or shame or anything attached to it, I think is a very powerful place to come from. I taught myself how not to feel for 2 decades. Like I didn't even know how to even feel emotions anymore. And for me, like that's, to come out of that and all the therapy and everything that I've done to now, be feeling really deeply and being able to share that with people and understand that, you can do it too. It's not just like Evan was able to do this. It's, everybody is capable of this. It's a matter of having those safe spaces, as Om said, and being able to create that group of people and individuals that you can share and confide in. And I think that's what the beauty of this podcast is going to be, for me at least. I think we all have our own reasons for doing this, and I think we all, can relate to one another in the way that we want to, with this podcast. And I think, just creating that safe space for people. I think that's the key here for me.
Yeah, I think one of the, from the day we first met, I really resonate with this message that you keep putting out on your channel, that these mental health, depression, these things try to isolate you. And by continuing to talk about it and speak about it, you are not only freeing yourself, but you are letting others know that you're not alone. And that's a message you've always been consistent about. And for me, I think that that is a big reason. Your message is a big reason why I want to do this show, to not only free ourselves, but to let other people, like you said, know that they're not alone.
I think one of the things for me is, having read Evan's posts, for the last few years, it's given me strength to know that somebody else is doing this. And I think that's one of the keys to this show. And having gone through, eating disorders and some mental health struggles recently, deeper mental health struggles, getting it off your chest really helps. And I think, Evan, you point that out eloquently, in that it's not a weakness and it's actually a strength. Like, when we talk about these things, we feel better. And so I wonder, for you, and I want to give some background. You were an EMS dispatcher, correct? Is that the correct title?
Yeah, air ambulance, fire, and EMS dispatcher. Yeah, correct.
Right. So on a everyday basis that you're at work, the phone calls coming in aren't, "I just hit the lotto," right? They're really traumatic experiences that you're dealing with. And I'm reading the book, Unfuck Your Brain, and it discusses being able to reestablish equilibrium from traumatic events, and that taking 90 days. At your job, you're being hit with these traumatic events probably every 90 seconds, let alone having 90 days to process it. How did you come to the realization that those experiences of being on the job were impacting you outside of the job as well?
You're just firing the tough questions right off the bat. I like it. For Just for context for people, so if people don't know who I am, and this might be the first time they're seeing it, so I was an EMS fire ambulance dispatcher for the better part of 2 decades. So that's my background. And we'll go into my story a little bit more later, but I want to get to your question, Jason. So, the unique part about that job, and what a lot of people don't understand, is you talk about the lottery. It's like the reverse lottery, where you're getting the worst of the worst, and it's like this like minute percentage that you're getting, but it's like you're getting that all the time from everybody across. Like, we answered calls for over 1 million people within the population that we cover, which is like insane to think, right? So being able to do that repetitively and be able to provide that same level of care and compassion and service to somebody who's phoning in, it's not an easy thing to do. I mean, I've trained and coached a lot of people to do the job in the last 20 years, and I feel like it's sometimes a skill that you either have. I believe it can be taught, but it's not it doesn't come innately to a lot of people. And hearing that trauma over and over again, I don't remember exactly. I don't like throwing stats out without having it, but there's a stat out there that talks about how the average person will go through 3 critical events in their life. Somebody who doesn't have a job where they're, expected to deal with trauma on a daily basis. 3 critical incidents in their entire life, whether that be a death of a family member, death of a close friend. People within emergency services will go through upwards of 700 critical events over their lifetime. Now, critical events are, life and death situations that occur. Now, I mean, you can only imagine what your body is going through in order to process those things. I mean, I lived in fight or flight for that entire time. I didn't know what a normal operating baseline was. I was expected to, people phone me and I'm expected to be on, whether it's somebody who has a cough or somebody who is having a heart attack, or somebody who came across somebody who's not breathing. You never knew what you were going to get on the phone line. So really, that 90 seconds that you talk about and not being able to process that, I mean, as a dispatcher, your dispatcher call taker, depending on which service you're working for, you're answering upwards of 40 to 50, 60, 70 calls a day, no problem. And trying to compartmentalize all that, and what do you do in those moments? And this is the argument that's always been the case for me in the industry is, there's not enough time to regulate and bring yourself back to a place for yourself. I can give everything to that entire day and that entire call. That's my job. That's what I applied for. That's what I'm here for. But I don't think anybody who goes into that profession really understands the personal, emotional, physical toll that it takes over a long period of time. I don't think anybody knew. I didn't know going into it. So it's quite a heavy topic, and there's so many, not just dispatchers. We're talking nurses, paramedics, doctors, anybody in that human services helping profession, I feel can resonate with what I'm saying. And I think that's the beauty, again, of doing the podcast like this. I think this is going to transcend endurance sports. It's going to bring people in that we never expected to be coming in. And I think that's the beauty of, that. But yeah, I think it affects more than just the average person.
We've had a discussion about this when we interviewed for your story, Evan, but talking about like how you mentioned that there wasn't like you didn't know for the longest time how much it affected you. What was the pivotal moment for you when you did realize that this was affecting you on a deeper level than you had understood because you had, as you said, numbed yourself to these emotions for so long?
Yeah, I can't pinpoint an exact day, but I can definitely pinpoint when everything changed for me. So having worked, 16 years of shift work of 4 on, 4 off, 2 days, 2 nights, 12-hour shifts. I mean, they say that schedule alone will take 10 years off of your life. It's actually more than somebody who smokes, which is insane to me, but there's hundreds of different types of jobs and roles that work that exact shift pattern. And it's killing people. So I ended up having an opportunity right when it would have been March of 2020 when everything hit. I had the opportunity to run our tactical operations center alongside with our emergency management team to respond to everything that was going on in the world. And obviously everybody was in their own little, silos. I live in Calgary, and I was responsible at that point for helping to manage like how we're going to respond to this from a emergency services standpoint, and all these calls that are coming in and people scared and worried and wondering what's going on. And I ended up evolving from that role into a different role, which allowed me to stay on a Monday to Friday position. I literally went from 16 years of shift work to Monday to Friday in a matter of a weekend. And I have never really worked like extensive 4 on, 4 off shift work since then. And I was next month sent home, and I was doing that job from home Monday to Friday, like out of the environment, at home, like getting proper sleep, getting proper meals, exercising, like doing everything that you would expect that would open up your world to be able to do when you have like, I have my treadmill right next to me at home and all these other things. And I started to like create this baseline for myself of like, oh, this is what I don't have to always be like switched on. And things started coming up. I started over that kind of year and a half, I started having some issues sleeping. I started having night sweats. I'd have night terrors, like just out of the blue. I didn't know what was going on. And then would have been October of 2021 when everything kind of just hit. They were bringing people back to the office, what like other people were doing. And I was starting to have panic attacks in my car before I went into the building. I was getting 2-3 hours of sleep a night. It was heavy and fast. Like I didn't realize after being out of the environment for, the better part of a year and then going back into it and realizing like, wow, like it's the environment that was bringing it on, and like the being away from it for that long period of time it brought so many things up from my past, from past calls and things that I thought didn't bother me, didn't affect me. But when you're having night terrors and night sweats and seeing these things in your dreams and not being able to go back to sleep, and you're up at 3 a.m. and you can't go back to sleep, yeah, it definitely hit hard and heavy. I stopped running for that period of time. I tried taking time off from work, not telling anybody. I didn't even tell my girlfriend, now wife at the time, Cassie, about what was going on. I hid it from everybody, hid it from my kids, hid it from friends, coworkers, everybody. Um, and that was when I knew like something was wrong. I couldn't shake it. And then I spoke to Cassie on Boxing Day, and I said like, I need help, like here, and I laid it all out. And so it was January 4th of 2022 when I went to the doctor and asked for help.
Why do you think you were hiding those emotions and those feelings? And what was it about Cassie specifically that she was the person you turned to say, I think I need help?
Whew. The I mean, Cassie is my safe place. That's the best answer for it. It was a place that I knew that I could actually fall and not be worried that I wouldn't be able to pick up the pieces. And I think that's the part about it, is like the shame, the guilt, the always thinking that I have to be on, like I can't be off. If I'm off, like everything falls apart. And if I fall, everything else comes with it. My career, my kids, my family, everything just like tumbles alongside of it. That is what the story that I told myself in my mind, which is exactly that. It was a story. I had this like elaborate story built in my mind that like my house of cards was like stronger than anybody's, and it was never going to come down. And if I let it come down, like it just wasn't an option in my mind. I wasn't about to let that happen at any point. Hiding it was more or less to try to deal with it on my own. And this is where it comes back to like, none of us are meant to deal with this on our own. Like the things and the thoughts and the things that we don't know, the things we don't know are because we don't know them. And in order to figure that out, you have to ask for help. And help doesn't have to be this overarching, go to therapy and do all these things. Help can literally be messaging a friend, phoning a friend, and just saying like, buddy, like I'm in the shit right now and I need something. And I think that's the, being able to create those types of conversations where, and friendships, and putting yourself around the people that you can fall apart with. Like for the longest time, like I surrounded myself with, people that were doing exactly what I was doing. My best friends and my best people that was friends with were all people that were in the profession that were also pushing through, avoiding, distracting, and damaging themselves. So what other example do you have?
Right.
So I think that to me is like surrounding yourself with people that you can be vulnerable with was an absolute game changer.
I can't say it enough about the unexpected connection to somebody. In other words, this morning I got a text message from an athlete I used to coach. I haven't heard from them in a year. And the text message literally just said, Hey, I hope you're doing well. Just wanted to let you know somebody out here is thinking of you. Like that alone is something that can really elevate you and change the day for you. As you were talking, one of the things I kept thinking about for myself was how I masked those situations, and laughter. For me, laughter was the way I masked the trauma, for lack of a better phrase. Was running a way you masked the trauma? Was laughing a way you masked the trauma? What were some of the things that you were doing to push those feelings, further away from the top and coming out until you had that conversation with Cassie?
Yeah, I mean, emergency services. I don't know if you have friends or anybody that are in close emergency services, but black humor is the like quintessential way to get rid of everything that you're experiencing, or at least you think it's a way to get rid of it. But really, like you were talking about, it's masking this like deep seated like underneath going like, okay, well, if I'm almost, you're almost like being condescending to yourself by saying it in that way, and making jokes and like the things that you say in the dispatch center, if the general public heard the jokes and the things that you're saying, they would be like, you are like horrible people. How dare you think bad about people? And it's like, I don't think any of that. That's like my coping mechanism to get through so I can answer the next call. So I could be there for like your brother, your sister, your mom, your dad. Like that's how I managed it. And it was so unhealthy. Like, I, you're conditioned to your environment that you're in. And I think that's obviously the case in emergency services. But yeah, like running for me was definitely the avoidance distraction piece. I could throw myself into the mountains for 6 hours and not talk to anybody
Yep.
except for my friend that I'm running with that tells me he has to go poop in the bushes. Like that's like the only conversation I need to have, right?
Right.
And like, I make light of the situation and joking about it here because like I believe like humor has a place, but I think it also has a like you have to be careful with it because if you're not being intentional with it and you're trying to mask what you're actually feeling, that is the like backwards way of again like trying to self-soothe yourself. It's not going to work. It's eventually going to show itself in a really bad way. So yeah, running was definitely that for me, and figuring that out took a long time to piece that together for myself. um, but yeah, black humor and running without a doubt were my distraction avoidance. I didn't move towards alcohol or drugs or any of those things, which is what a lot of people could move
Mhm.
towards depending on what they're feeling. And that's everybody has their vices, and what they use to self-soothe is going to be different, and we all learn that from our childhoods, like whether it be from friends, family, how we were raised, what we saw, what we were taught. I think that's the unique thing, is we all have different versions of that, but it's all similar but different.
Yeah, I would say for me, humor was and is in some ways still like a big coping mechanism. Laughing at myself, kind of laughing at, poking fun at each other, having fun with it, putting a smile up. And one of the things that really stood out to me about this discussion we all just had is like just how many different coping mechanisms we have to avoid these hard conversations and these hard thoughts, and just how much weight there is behind simple words. Like, how many times in our lives has somebody asked, "How are you doing?" And how many times have we said those two magic words or unmagical words, "I'm fine."
Mhm.
Like, how many times? And there's a book that I read. It's a small book. It's for everybody, but it's written like a children's book. I don't know if you've read The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. But there is a quote in there where the boy asks one of his companions, "What is the bravest thing you've ever said?" And the response was, "Help." And one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, when you finally did say, "Help, I need help," what was that like for you? I know for me, like, those were the heaviest words I'd said, harder than any ultra marathon I've ever run, even harder than any 200 I've ever run, to say, "I need help." So what was that like for you?
I shattered into a million pieces. It was like that house of cards that I had built above me, just like giant gust of wind came and just like tossed them all over the room. And I was just like, I had no idea who I was. My whole identity of my career, everything was gone. I was like struggling with running at the time and figuring out like I knew it was helping me some way to manage it, but it wasn't for the right reasons. The shame, the guilt, how am I going to do this? What's wrong with me? Creating all these stories and, going to a therapist for the first time. It's interesting. I was reading my journal the other day from that period of time, and I didn't write for the last 2 years, like entirely. There's like little pockets of time that I wrote for, 2 weeks or a month or here and there. And I went back through those just to like jog my memory a little bit of like what those feelings actually were for me. And it was like complete and utter like just lost, despair. Even though you were asking for help and you knew you were going to get help, you're like, I don't know how this is going to go for me. And that uncertainty and that unknown weighed so heavily on me. even though I knew I was, and I don't believe there's like, a right or wrong thing. I know I was going down a path that was towards some sort of change. And that was the way to go was, if things aren't working, well, you have to change something. You don't know if it's going to be right or wrong until you go down that path. And, luckily I kind of surrendered to the process. Took me, 2, 3, 4 months. I joke that I was trying to win at therapy during that time. So it took a long time for those walls to come down because I'd be like, no, like I'm doing so good at this. Like I am crushing this. And it's great to celebrate, but it was like I wasn't letting go and I wasn't surrendering to the process. I was still hiding. And it was really the day that absolutely destroyed me was when I had to go and do a psychological assessment because my um, previous organization, I will say, didn't believe what was happening to me. And I ended up having to go through a psych assessment through workers' compensation. And I still remember my psychologist the day before telling me, like, she's like, I know you're holding back. I know there's something you're not letting go. And if you don't release that tomorrow during your psych assessment, you may not get the help that you need and deserve to move forward with this. And like that was like even got tears coming to my eyes thinking about like that was the hardest day I've ever experienced. Like no ultra, no 200 miler, no like ankle fracture, anything. Like that was the hardest day I've had in my entire life. Not the help day, the day that I had to actually like lay it all out there and completely break open. That was the day.
Has it gotten easier for you since that day to be vulnerable and open because you went through that super hard day?
Without a doubt. Like
So,
there's something about surrendering and letting go that changes the entire paradigm of what you believed you were.
and you kind of answered the question, but I was going to ask, how has being open about your mental health journey changed your relationships with others personally and maybe professionally? Like, do you feel that you now show up as whole, so that when they're asking questions or they're, bringing issues or laughter, like you're there, you're present, as they say?
Yeah, I think you don't really understand what the costs are going to be to acquire your peace. And I've lost friendships, no doubt, without a doubt. And do I miss those people? Sure. But I strongly believe that me doing that put me in a place where they weren't able to meet something within themselves. And it was too much for them to be able to support me in that moment. And that made them drift away. And that's okay. Like there's no shame, there's no ill will, there's no guilt attached to that. It just meant that they weren't able to be there for me the way that they wanted to be or didn't even know how to be. There's lots of people within running groups and run clubs that I know just like they're maybe not interested in like running with me in the groups or anything like that. And that's okay. And I strongly believe it's because sometimes when people are really themselves, it forces people to look inward and sometimes they're not ready for it. And that's okay too. Like there's no shame, there's no guilt attached to that. Like if you're not ready, that's okay. But just know that it's like there are these people in safe spaces that are creating this for you when you are. And I think that's the beauty of these conversations is, people who speak outwardly about their stories, I strongly believe are the same people that either weren't believed about their story, thought they were like overdoing it or, doing things for the wrong reasons or maybe outright lying about what they experienced. But it's like people don't lie about like fake depression. They fake being okay. Like you can definitely see like and depression is this like evil thing that wants you alone. It wants you isolated. It wants you like by yourself. It doesn't want you to have friends around you. So of course it's going to like tear you down. It's going to take you away from the things that you love. It's going to do all those things. But the surrendering and the letting go to be able to like get myself to a place where I can now go out and seek out these people myself, like you and and like a ton of other people, even within emergency services, has reached out to me. There's another group that I've been connected with for a while as well too, that just random pockets of, border service agents and police officers and firefighters and everybody just like being willing to talk about these things. And you realize that it's like, my identity isn't what I did or any of those things. You create this like persona for yourself. And once it's gone, because you've tied yourself too closely to it, it's just like, just implodes. What do you have left? And that's why it's like, I'll never tie myself so closely to what I do as my identity ever again because of that. And that's what makes all of these things so much easier now. Like I'm just honestly like unapologetically myself. And if that brings people in, great. If that pushes people away, like
That happens.
That's it.
I remember in therapy about 20 years ago, the therapist said to me, think of relationships as a dartboard. And the ones that you want to keep the closest to are going to be in the bullseye. But people don't always stay in the bullseye. They float out to the edge. And then the people that are at the edge come come closer to the bullseye. And they just move on this spectrum on a consistent basis. And I use that visualization when people that we used to connect with and people that we used to talk to are no longer there. And I realized, they have lives, they're doing things. Maybe they're uncomfortable, to your point earlier, with what I'm doing and with who I am today versus who I was when they met me. And putting that visualization for me makes it much easier for me when, people float off towards the edges. I'm not trying to grip onto them and bring them back to the center anymore like I used to, because it was that feeling of, why don't you like me anymore? Why don't you like me anymore? And to your point of, once you start to release that stuff, it becomes easier to maintain friendships and relationships.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. I think that and there's a sense of like, it's hard to like when you finally have that implosion and that revelation and you find yourself. I think it's even harder in today's day and age because we have social media. We there Which is why there's a need for us to have a show like this. And let me just, I just had this thought that there are not two other people I can ever imagine myself having this conversation with. And I just really appreciate that. But like, social media is full of so much. Like, one of the phrases I like to use is real being compared to reels. Um, and so one of the things that I wanted to kind of ask you about is the importance of not only being authentic, in your day-to-day conversations, but the importance of being authentic and authentically yourself in your persona, when you are on social media, when you see these perfect squares everywhere you go. And even though I know, I think we're all guilty of this. Like, even though I know that like they are perfect squares, there's still this part of me that compares and wonders like, why is this working out for them and it's not working out for me? The comparison always comes in. And so I have to ask you about like what it means to be authentically yourself on social media, to break through the real, the REL, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, so like you said, social media is one of those things. It can be used as a tool or it could be used as a distraction. It could be used as something to learn from, or it could be used to something to like just completely, make your mind go blank because you don't want to think about anything else. And, you know, I, every person on social media, everything, we only get a small percentage of that like person. And that's why, like, for me, I've been really intentional with the relationships that I have been building of, it's important to do things in real life and get off of social media and do those things, because I don't think you truly know people until you start going down that road and you have those conversations away from the social media side of things. And it's great. It's allowed us to connect in amazing ways with people that we probably never would have, crossed paths with otherwise. So, you can't vilify it because it's, it does have its pros and cons. But to show up authentically is, that you're showing up that way. Like alignment is the word that I've used a lot lately when, you're doing things and all of a sudden like that next thing just like shows up. You're like, oh, like I wasn't expecting that, but this feels like I should be moving in this direction. So let's just go with it. And that to me is like that alignment piece shows itself up when you are being authentic, when you are, being your best self to yourself first, and other people see that as genuine and they're like, oh, like I really resonate with that person. I really feel that they're, telling me the truth, and, they're showing me different sides of them that other people aren't showing me. Which is, the unique part about it is, you can show all the good, and that's great. Like some people have social media for different reasons, whether it's for, influencing and marketing and selling stuff, that's fine. But I choose to use it from a tool perspective and show up authentically for myself. If I see something funny that I want to post, I'm like, I just post it. I don't question it anymore. I'm just like, you know what? If the 10 people that write me back and laugh and say that's the funniest thing ever, I'm like, think about, I always think, and this is why when you talk about authentic, I'm like, think about getting 100 likes on a post or even 10 comments. And you're like, if those 100 people are 10 comments, if those people were in your house right now telling you those things and like commenting, you'd be like, holy crap, there's a lot of people in my house. Like, we don't realize like the influence that we can have. And it doesn't have to be this, like, again, people focus on followers and all these other things. It's like, I would rather have, 2,000 people that genuinely want to, follow me for what I do, ask me questions and create a community around it, rather than having, 200,000 followers that, just want to see me run 200 miles because they think I'm crazy. Like, I don't want that. That's not genuine to me. I would rather have that like curated group of people that have found me, I found them, we have a relationship, and I can shoot them a message, they can help me, I can help them, and create that bond that way. And I think that's the authenticity of showing up that way, is you attract those people. Like you have this alignment with individuals that they just show up without you even trying, because you're not trying, you're just being. You're not trying to be anything else. You're just like present with yourself. So that's what it is for me.
As you're talking, I'm just keep replaying the idea of how this show came about, right? Like you emailed Omen and I, and you were wanting to talk about um, your running journey and getting it out there more, and potentially working with brands and these kinds of things. And like, there's 0% chance any one of us thought that this was what would come from that email. But I'm glad that we're here. But the question I want to ask you is, what was it about Ohm and myself that you were like, I'm going to email those guys? Because if we're talking about genuineness and vulnerability and showing up and being who we are, like how much of that played a role in you saying, I want to talk to those two guys as opposed to anybody else on the planet?
Yeah. Definitely your hat, definitely always. I don't know. No, let's be serious here for a moment. So I I will say that you both have a way of just being, again, unapologetically yourselves. There's no, like, you're not hiding in the shadows. You're not trying to, fleece anybody. You're literally just being who I believe you are. And I mean, like, and for context for people, like, we've only met in person after Ohm destroyed himself at Tahoe 200 last year. So it's like he was sleep deprived. Jason was sleep deprived from pacing. Like, it wasn't like this, but that's why I will say the beautiful part about running and meeting people like this is we get to see people at their most vulnerable.
100%.
And the bonds that can get created when people are seeing you at your absolute worst. And I mean, not to say that was your worst, Dom, because I'm sure you've had worse, but
Moab was worse.
Moab was definitely worse.
But like when you feel like that person is like probably like pretty low down, and you have these conversations with them, and we were only virtual up to that point, but even that, like 15 to 30 minutes that we chatted and just kind of laughed back and forth and got to finally meet in person, you have this different connection with people as soon as, like you were talking about before, about like taking it out of the social and bringing it into like real life. Like social media isn't gonna, like, nobody's coming. It's not gonna come and save you. Like it's definitely not gonna come and save you. But is Om gonna come and save me if I needed something? Maybe. But it's not going to be all of those like 25 reels that I jammed through at bedtime to like laugh maybe once or twice, rather than maybe, hey, I shot Om a text and just said, hey man, think of you. Hope you're having a great week and happy recovery. Damn, like that hits way stronger than 25 reels from random people that I don't know. So the way you show up in the community, I think, is what drew me to it. And knowing that, I've had thoughts about doing a mental health podcast from the moment that I went off work. I was like, more people need to know about this. Like, this is bullshit. Like, I don't understand why more people aren't talking about this. But I always knew I didn't and couldn't do it alone in the way that I wanted to. And I think that's the beauty of this, is like, we talk about not doing it alone.
Yeah.
And we're creating a podcast with three people with such diverse backgrounds that, again, if you were to put all three of us in a line in black t-shirts and black jeans and said, tell me how these three are connected, I don't know if people can answer that question.
The closest they would say is that you and I are both bald.
No, hey, this is by choice, sir.
So is this part over here.
But I think that's the unique thing about this, is creating something together to show people that they don't have to do it alone. And we're just like, we've probably done a lot of it alone on our own journeys, right? I don't want to speak for you guys, but I feel like we've all kind of felt like we had to do it alone at one point. And now we're all just like, damn, it would have been a hell of a lot easier had I reached out to my friends or family sooner and not felt that guilt or shame. And maybe I shouldn't say not felt. You can feel the guilt and shame, but you need to like honor it, accept it, move through it, and then get on to the next side of it. Like, you have to feel it. I don't want people to think that you don't have to feel, because it is true. Like, if you don't feel it, you're not going to be able to move through it. Right. So that's what it is for me with you guys. With that.
No, I mean, I appreciate that, and I have to agree with like the doing it alone part. Like, from the moment I was 9 years old and didn't even know what the words depression meant and had it, to the moment I was 25 years old and picked up running, to even just last year on February, or actually this year on February 27th, when I finally decided to go try therapy again and actually commit to it. Like, there was always this sense of like isolation and feeling alone. So it really does mean a lot to me to be able to do this show with two individuals with diverse backgrounds, but with the same intentions of like bringing to light and breaking the silence and going that distance, to quote the show, but and to put this out there and let people know that they are not alone. And I'm just very excited for the prospect of people reaching out to us with words and being able to, maybe they are taking their first step and maybe they need somebody to amplify their voice, or maybe they need to feel that maybe they need to have that amplification for themselves internally. But like, either way, like, I believe that this is going to be a show where we can be a presence for so many individuals who feel like they're alone.
Yeah, I think we get inspiration, motivation from different things. The three of us do, and everybody's listening does as well. And some of the inspiration I've had for releasing my feelings in a more open and vulnerable way is because we've had other men do it on our platform, from Reed Burrows to you, Evan, having done it, to we just recently posted stories Toby Matthias, as well as Brad Huff. We've talked with people offline that we haven't published their stories yet, but I think that coming together in a sense, right? There's the strength in numbers concept has allowed me to do that as well. And I think there's another part of it that, and I'm going to ask this of Evan too, is for me, like I've done hard things, physically hard, right? Getting through a 250-mile race, getting through a 100-mile race, and you have to have some of that mental strength to get through those things. I feel like having done those things in those scenarios has also helped me to stand strong to talk about these things openly and more vulnerably. Evan, I'm going to put that question on you. Do you think that the ability to have gone through some of the hard physical things, as well as some of the hard mental things that you've done, has given you this ability to take that next step? Like if you're in a race, I got to take the next step as I make my way to the finish line. Is that something that you think can be like parallel tracks between running and talking about this stuff?
Absolutely. If you were to put my therapy and ultra running journey on a line from like 2017 to when as things kind of progressed over the next 7 years, everything has a reason and a purpose for why it went to the next stage, whether it be the therapy or, running a 200 miler. It was like things went in lockstep. And I think the suffering that we choose helps us with the suffering that we don't. So like me intentionally putting myself into a 200 miler, like I'm choosing that. I'm actively choosing that as a choice. And I believe it's like if you actively choose something, if you're having a rough time during that race, are you actually suffering because you chose that? Like I don't
Right.
believe in this and I know there's races called it, like I don't believe in sufferfest. I don't believe in like going into this like deep dark like abyss and like using the darkness to like come out to the light. Like I don't run from that place. It just doesn't serve me. I used it as a distraction and avoidance at that time. And what did I get? I got cramps. I got like, like I think about all the, I think about all the things that happened in those initial like long distance races that happened to me that aren't happening now because I'm running from such a different place. If you're running from that place of joy, self love, and yeah, like these hard things that you're doing, you're definitely going to learn from them. And I always say that it's like there's parts of me that die on the trails when I'm out there, and there's parts of me that are born. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like the parts that die, I get the chance to leave those things behind and go like, those are not for me anymore. Those aren't serving me. I don't want them. But I get to take these like really amazing things that it's like, oh man, like you finished a 200 miler, or you finished 200 milers. Like we talked about, and it'll be coming out in the magazine. We talked about celebration in the magazine coming up, and like we had a really long discussion about that, and I can't wait for people to read that because I think that's what I'm kind of talking about here is that celebration piece. And being able to take those things back into your life and actually like use something that's tangible um, from those races, like without a doubt, it helps you manage everything, whether it be life or kids or anything that you have going on, but you have to choose it. Like you can't, again, and that's why I always believe that after races and events, like there's the process and the training of getting there, then there's the race. And then there's like people talk about like recovery being the big thing. It's like to me, it's like recovery and reflection.
Yeah.
You have to have both because that's your opportunity to like you worked so hard to get there. The race is done. It's a memory now. And now you get the opportunity to like reflect and take those things with you and leave behind the things that you maybe had struggles with or that you realize like, oh man, like I didn't have to go there. I could have done this.
Yep.
And not to shame or guilt yourself, but to like learn from it. And that's the beauty in it is like you have such a long period of time out there in the races that we do to like learn and think like it's so different. There's very few places that you can do that in the world now where you can actually be present with yourself for that long of time. And I think I will argue that a lot of people, I think struggle with being present with themselves, whether it be in running or racing or career or family life. And if you can just put yourself in that space for a while and be okay with sitting with your thoughts, like, it may not be great thoughts that come up, and maybe it might lean you towards doing something that you know, go into therapy, talking to a friend, whatever it is. But I think we owe it to ourselves to like sit in that presence sometimes.
Yeah, I'll turn this over to you in a second, but this is the third time this has come up in 48 hours. In a world of extreme connectedness, we are disconnected more than probably ever before, because we get this feeling like, well, I talked to Evan, even though I just emailed him, or I talked to Evan, even though it was just a text message, even if that happens, or I know what Evan is doing because I saw it on his Instagram post. So I feel like I've already connected with him. So I don't have to actually talk to him or pick up the phone and call him now. And that leads us to become more and more disconnected, which then, to your point, makes it harder for us to sit in our own feelings, because we're like, oh, I need to go check out what Ohm is doing now. And I need to go check out what Susie is doing now, and all these other people, because we're searching for that connection. And instead of picking up the phone or going outside and touching grass, for lack of a better phrase, we're turning to these devices. And I think you're 100% accurate in this idea that we have a hard time sitting within ourselves, alone, silent, and reflecting on our thoughts, and trying to make our lives and our days better. I'll turn it over to you now.
Yeah, it's thinking about when I went to therapy, one of the sessions I had that was a very difficult session was realizing, like, when you put it in a sentence, it sounds like the most ridiculous thing ever, that of all the pillars in your life, when things go south, the first thing that you let go of, or at least for me, I won't speak for anyone else, the first thing that I let go of was my own self-care. Because I wanted to hold on to everything else, I let go of my own self-care. And then my therapist posed me the question, when was the last time I took 5 to 10 minutes to myself, outside of a race, outside of any activity or anything like that, to just sit within myself, to journal, to reflect? And I could not remember the last time I had done something like that. I seriously could not remember the last time I had done something like that. And when I did it, it was one of the most hardest things I've ever done. Uh, like, there's that one of the posts I made leading up to this podcast was the quote about, like, was the Rumi quote, something along the lines of, like, you can hear the silence. If I'm probably misquoting it, but, like, the silence just spoke so many volumes. And although I had experienced that in an ultra, like, in an ultra, you're still moving, you're still doing other things, but there's this genuine, like, there was almost this genuine discomfort when I took silence for the first time, and I was doing nothing but just being silent and reflecting on my thoughts and sitting within myself. And I'll turn it back over to you, Evan, and I also want your thoughts on this, Jason. What were there moments like that for you when you realized that, like, you had not sat with yourself in silence, or you had not taken that time to reflect? And did you ever have a moment where you thought, like, maybe even subconsciously, man, this is really hard?
Yeah, it brings me back to, I know I don't like talking about studies because I hate referencing them without having the data sitting in front of me. But I will find it. I'll probably put it, maybe we can add it to the show notes. There was a study that was done where they took a group of men and a group of women, and they stuck each one of them in a room, and they said, we want you to sit here for 15 minutes. And there was a shock device attached to them. And they had the choice to either like sit there for 15 minutes with their own thoughts, or they could shock themselves. And the number, I can't even, I know the percentage was very high. It was something like over 70% of men chose to shock themselves, not just once, like multiple times during that session, just so they didn't have to like sit with themselves.
Oh my
And I
God,
think
I
that
believe it. I believe it.
when I saw that, I was so shocked when I read it. I was like, but that's what it is. It's like
Mhm.
I argue that we have this like I know, you know, people have thrown out different terms of like an epidemic of loneliness, whatever. It's like I believe, at least for men, there's like an epidemic of not feeling, like purposely, like pushing it away, avoiding it, distracting from it, whatever you can possibly do, whatever vice you can move towards, so you don't have to do the thing that's actually probably harder than the other thing, is what you're going to choose every time. Like
Mhm.
until you realize that it's like the freedom that you can get once you can get past that, like understanding how to feel. Because it's like people think, being sad or crying or all these things are like because you're like broken. I'm like, that just means you're working like really well. Like your body is actually able to process things in real time as to how you're feeling. Like that's like a crazy skill to be able to have. And I lost that for so long. So to have that, like that level of like feeling back, is like scary at times, because I have no idea if I'm going to be watching a TV show and the next minute they put something sappy on there and I'm crying on the couch and I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like, but whereas before it would just be like, there would be no way that I would cry at a TV show. Not a chance. Like it wouldn't even cross my mind to be like, oh, this is so sad. I'd be like that, like, because I saw people as robots.
Right.
Like to me, people were robots. I was meant to answer the phone, fix them until the paramedics got there, and then move on to the next one. I wasn't meant to feel what they were feeling.
Mhm.
And then when I started feeling what they were feeling and took it on for myself, that's when it was just like the floodgates wide open. Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts, Jason.
Yeah, I will answer this. There's no study here. It's an N equals one. But just probably 6, 8 weeks ago, I don't know, I went through fear and failure simultaneously. And I happened to be by myself, and it was hard. And so the scenario was I had just done a race here in California. And once the race was over, I had attached my identity to the results. And the race company didn't post the results for, I still don't know if they've posted the results, although I found them out. But my identity was there, and I was in anguish. Why isn't that there? I want to celebrate. I want to celebrate. I had attached so much to that. And then I had to get in a plane and fly to Salt Lake City and drive for 4 hours by myself to meet Ohm, to pace him at Moab. And then the failure occurred. I felt like I had failed him because I couldn't get him to the finish line. And I had to work through the process of, I'm going to have to pull this guy. I'm going to have to tell a person that I love that they can no longer do the thing that they love because he was in such bad shape. And that turmoil and that fear and that agony went on and on and on until he made the decision himself. And then the very next day, I'm driving 4 hours back by myself, trying to process all of this failure and get in a plane and fly back here to LA. And then I go and sit in a hotel room because Lori is in class for 12 to 13 hours. And so there's no connection to other people, essentially, nobody I can turn to talk to release these fears and these angers and um, this this emotion. And it set up a scenario of falling into a depression. And then Lori asked me a question. It was a Thursday night. She asked me a question, and I turned off the TV and I answered it. It was like word vomit. It was like all of those things that had been bundled up for a week just came flowing out, and I could feel my shoulders relaxing. I could feel myself getting better and talking about it and releasing all of that stress and anxiety. Um, to the point where your message came honestly at the exact right time because I had just gone through all of that stuff. And then your message came in, and then Brad Huff wanted to talk about his mental health struggles, and Toby got connected to us through Dr. Aaron Ayala, and he talked about his struggle. It was like all of these things, and it was like, um, it's metaphorical, right? I don't think that it just happened this way coincidentally, but like I got it off my chest, and all of a sudden here's somebody else who wants to get it off their chest, and somebody else who wants to get it off their chest, and it's grown to this level so that now I can actually sit in silence and think about the things that Evan told me, and think about the things that Ohm has shared with me, and think about my own personal feelings about all of those things too. And have made my way, like I said earlier, I'm taking one step closer to the finish line. Now, Granted, that finish line is going to always be moving, right? I don't know that I'll ever reach it, but I know that I'm taking one step closer to it. And I'll use your phrasing earlier that a piece of me will die and I'll get to leave it behind me. And then something else will get reborn in me and I'll get to celebrate that as I keep moving forward. So it is amazing what can happen to a person when they're actually able to sit with their feelings and process them. It's not easy, not by any stretch of the imagination. It is not easy. But I do think it's necessary. It's a little bit morbid, and I know we're running out of time here, but I want to ask the two of you this. Um, Oftentimes, not as much as I used to when I was younger, but I would write my own obituary. And the reason I would write my own obituary was because I wanted to do the things that I said I wanted to be recognized for, the things that I wanted to accomplish in life. And that allowed for self-reflection. Am I where I want to be today so that I can accomplish these things? So when this obituary gets printed, I've done those things. Have you guys done self-reflection in that way? Maybe not writing an obituary, but thinking back on, am I accomplishing the things that I want to accomplish in life that may not merit public applause and 100 likes on a post? I'm just doing these things because they're going to help me, which will also help others. I'll put that to you first.
I reflect on that a lot, actually quite a bit, especially when I have put myself in situations where I've done some extreme races like the Everest Ultra in Nepal and being out there on a 200 or being out in the jungle in Peru, like, or even just sitting at home. But my thought process had changed a lot. And I think a lot of it is growth in the journey, um, from like accomplishing things. Like for me, the obituary is like thinking about how I'm going to reflect on my life when I'm on my deathbed. Um, and I have been like in the journey of changing that mindset of like, have I achieved all the things I wanted to achieve? As many times as I've said, like, nobody's going to remember how many Lamborghinis you have or what house you have or what time you got in a 200 or whatever. Like, it's a journey that is ongoing. And I think I'm on the other side of that spectrum now, which is asking myself one question. When you lived your life, did you live it in a way that you made people feel the way you wanted to make them feel? And to me, like, that I want to live a life where I make others feel good about themselves. Um, and I want to live a life where I'm growing constantly through scary things and I'm growing in a way where I can help others grow on their journey and help lift other people up. And I always ask myself the question, constantly check in with myself, are my goals aligned with that purpose of making others feel special, making others feel like they can touch the moon? And if the answer is yes, then I'm on the right path, no matter how scary it is. And it should be scary, but that is the reflection I have is no longer attached to I is for the most part no longer attached to like what I achieve, but rather how I've made the people around me feel. Because I could have done the Triple Crown this year, but if I'd finished Moab and I was not doing the things that were morally correct, like with my moral values, if I finished that and I stepped over somebody to do it, then I don't want that. I want to finish all my races doing the things that make others feel like they can touch the moon and feel amazing and like align with the way I want to make people feel. And that applies to every aspect of my life, business and relationships and everything. So to me, it's about that. But to answer to round around and answer your question, yes, I think about it probably a lot more than I should, but I do think about it quite often.
How about for you, Evan?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a tough one for me because I preach reflection and other things. I feel as though I've been in the thick of healing for the last 2.5 to 3 years, and I haven't had the energy to give myself everything that I may preach or talk about and suggest that other people should. And I think that's given me a lot of pause for, it's okay to pause your healing journey at some point and live for a little bit. And I think that's the space that I'm stepping into right now, where I've done a shit ton of healing and I've done a lot of hard work and I've done a lot of things to get myself to where I am. And we're not a result of our circumstances. I believe we're like a collection of our choices and the stories that we tell ourselves about those choices that we make. And those stories can be good stories, or they can be stories that literally cause us anxiety and stress and shame and guilt and all of these other things. And I think, that reflection piece allows you to really like collect those choices that you've made and create not create, but like tell the stories that you want to tell in the way you want to tell them without just rushing through things and thinking that the ball is going to drop and something bad is going to happen now, because all these things have been going really well. Like something bad is going to happen. Those stories do come up. We all, we don't choose our own thoughts. They just come, right?
Yep.
I don't know if you saw that Ricky Gervais Netflix episode, but special, but he talks about this, where it's like we don't choose our own thoughts. Like they just come, and we get to like decide. We get to choose how we respond to them. And I will just add that. So I had a friend that just recently passed away, just a few weeks ago. Very sudden. Was starting to become closer with him. Had no idea why we were like super aligned in the things that we were doing. He started running a little bit more last year, trail running and doing a few events. And he was asking me if I would consider coaching him next year. He was looking at doing a backyard ultra, and he passed away in a motorcycle accident. Literally that day I saw him, he was just finishing something up at our house. And that night he passed away in a motorcycle accident, gone. And, I only got the opportunity to know him for better part of a year and a half. But I wouldn't change it for anything. And knowing that it's like, his quote that he has had on his website and socials and everything, it's like, and I think this is why I say it, is it comes back to the, not doing one thing for the rest of your life. So the quote is, life is too short to only do one thing. And that is like when I say I'm like putting healing on pause and I'm looking at like doing something, this is what the podcast is. This is what all my runs are next year. Like, I'm not just going to do one thing anymore, and I'm going to show up the way that I want to show up for everybody, for everybody else. And like truly reflect on like, what do I want for myself now after all of this healing? So that's where reflection comes in for me to bring it back around. Is like, what do I want now? Like, I've done all this healing and I put myself in this really great position. Like, what do I want that next phase to be, and what that next story to look like?
Awesome. Thank you for that response. Before I get to our last question, we have a comment on Instagram from Toby Marshall, and he said, Evan, wow, your experience is hitting home. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I am better today for hearing it. Thankful for this podcast with you all. And Toby is a paramedic. So clearly there's a connection there. We didn't know what we didn't know when we launched this podcast. So, Evan, I'm going to turn to you. Was this the thing you thought we would get out of each other when we decided to launch Enduring Minds?
I think we've only scratched the surface. Honestly, and the thing is, when you start to be vulnerable, especially with, the three of us don't know each other very well. And that's like the truth. We'll put that out there. Like, we know each other at the like racing, a little bit about my story. I know a little bit about yours, but at like a true soul level, I don't think either of us know each other. And maybe you and Om know each other a little bit better, obviously with Run Try Mag and Run Try Bike. But I think that's the cool thing about this, is like finding out like what you don't know is like, that's like a really cool place to be, knowing that it's like, I want to find that out, because that's going to unlock so many things for all the listeners, everybody. That I even said, like in my post leading up to this, of, whoever lets us in is going to get like the most true, rawest version of us. And that is like that is what I will offer. And that will always be what I offer. So I want people to know that like when they come here, and they listen to our podcast, and the guests that we choose to bring on are going to be just as impactful, we're going to be learning right alongside of them. Like, I haven't stopped learning. I'm not going to stop learning, because then I'm dead. Right. And we talked about imposter syndrome and all these other things.
Yeah.
It's like, if I'm not feeling that, then I'm doing something wrong. Like, I want to be feeling that.
Yep.
Did I want to feel that 2 years ago when I was going through my shit? Absolutely not. I'd be running the other direction. I wanted nothing to do with feeling uncertain or unknown. But now it's like, let's do it. Like, let's figure out how far this can go and who wants to be a part of it, and, you know, be able to tell people's stories in a like very unique way, and probably tell people's stories for the first time who actually trust us to be able to have the conversations and do it justice, and show other people that, you know, it's a community that I think we're building with this, and not just drop in and listen when you want. It's going to be a group of people that begin to feel connected in a very different way that, yes, social media has allowed it, but like, I see us eventually taking it out of the reels and to the real, and doing retreats or whatever it is. Like, I know we talked about so many things, but it's like, this is just the beginning of that.
Yeah. How about you? Had our first episode, and we've been podcasting for 2 years now with Fireside Chat, with Fiery Embers, What's in Your Earbuds, and every other show we have on our network. Totally different show. Episode 1 is wrapping up. What are your thoughts on what we're doing here and how we've done on this first episode?
To me, this isn't just, and I think this echoes what Evan was saying, this isn't just a podcast. This is bigger than that. This is a movement. I believe that this is going to transcend both the EAPN. It's going to transcend Run, Try, Bike. It's going to transcend who we are as individuals, and it's going to bring something to the community that people have been desiring, especially among men. And we are really only scratching the surface. Like, we are really just starting to introduce ourselves to the audience. And I think as this show goes on, we're going to be digging deeper and deeper and going into those really hard and raw conversations. And I'm both scared and excited for those conversations, because I am learning as I go, not just like learning about this per se, and like learning about mental health and all of this, but like, I'm on my own. You never stop growing as an individual, and like on your own mental health journey. And it's not a A to B path. It's a roller coaster. There are different parts of it. There are times where you feel like you have taken 2-3 steps back. There are times when you think that you've hit an epiphany, but this is not just a journey where we are going to be presenting information. This is a journey that we are on with you. And I think that the impetus is on us to continue to be vulnerable and continue to share those high and low moments, and let you know that we are also on that path and continuing to grow and change and evolve. And so this is a movement to me, and this is a community, and this is something special, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
Awesome. Thank you, Evan and Om, for putting the brain power together to come up with this podcast and this idea to talk about men's mental health in a vulnerable and open way, to share our thoughts and feelings and emotions with people on the outside, and not keeping them to ourselves. I think it's a super important topic. So thank you very much. For those of you who are listening and who joined us today, our next episode will be in December. It looks like it will be December 11th. The three of us will be back on here. This time, Evan and I will be interviewing Om, so that you can get a better feel for who he is as a person, and the things that have impacted his life and have allowed him to grow into who he is today. And then in January, Evan and Om will interview me, and then we'll start to bring on guests starting in February. Om, Evan, thank you guys so much for making this conversation that we had into a reality. And we'll see you guys soon again.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, Jason.